This is Cindy Shebley from the Web Seller Circle, and this presentation is about photography for eBay, or using your photos to drive traffic into your listings. Your challenge as a seller is to turn those snapshots into good-looking professional photographs so that you can compete with the big box sellers that are coming online. And that's kind of hard. How is it that you can produce a professional looking photo and at the same time let your customers know that you're something more special than those big box sellers? You're a mom and pop company that treasures their patronage and will respect and care for their customers. And how can you do that with a photograph really quickly? That's what this presentation is about. People read photos quicker than words. It's no doubt. It's sort of hardwired into our brains, since the time of cavemen, that we were looking at images and getting ideas or representations about what those images were. In 2006, an eBay study found that users spend an average of 17 minutes per day on the eBay site. Well, that was in 2006, and of course we know things have changed since then. There isn't a whole lot of information being released by eBay, but a couple of weeks ago I checked the Alexa rankings on eBay and found that the average eBay visit is about 13.5 minutes per day, with the average number of pages that they visit about 30 pages. That equals about 28 to 30 seconds per page. And I dare say that anybody really spends 28 to 30 seconds on this page going up and down through this long scrolling page of listings. They might click in and out, but I suspect that this page is treated more like a typical website page where you get about 3 seconds of viewing time before the user decides what they're going to click into, which listing they've decided that they're going to look into and find out more information about. That makes this page really important and very valuable real estate. People are going to skim through this page. And that makes this study that I found, or this software I found, very valuable. It's called a heat map. And what a heat map does is it tracks somebody's eyes, or simulates the tracking of somebody's eyes through a website, and where those eyes go in the first 5 seconds of viewing a page. And here we can see on this page that somebody's eyes, or the most eye tracking, was right here in the middle, this red spot right here. And then the eyes bounced up and down. Interesting thing of this heat map, if you notice, is this that this red right here is getting a lot of play, but it does bounce up into this banner ad up here, which I thought was interesting because I've always thought these banner ads were fairly useless, but I'm going to kind of rethink it now, knowing that banner ads can get really good heat map or eye views. But what I've done for this demonstration is I have taken screenshots and put them through this simulation, or this software, to see where people's eyes are tracking on the various pages using different photographs. And you can do the same with your listings by going to this FENG /GUI.com. I call it feng shui. I probably am not pronouncing that right, but that's the idea. It's sort of like where people are tracking, or where people are comfortable with. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how this tracking can help us create more interesting, or more pleasing, or more attractive photographs for our viewers. First thing that I want to say, though, is that when it comes to photographs, there's 3 things that you have to manage. First, it's your camera, then the light and background, and time. So let's break this down really quickly for you. Your camera. take classes. Now you're all members of the Web Seller Circle, so we do have classes on both Photoshop elements, and I'll be putting camera classes up online as well. Take classes at your community college, read about your camera, and practice. Now, professional photographers didn't become professional photographers by just picking up a camera and clicking away. They practice, practice, and practice. So I want you to do the same. Take that camera with you and use it, not just for your eBay shots, but take pictures of other stuff and start learning how that camera works for you. The more comfortable you are with your camera, the better results you're going to get for your pictures. The next thing we're going to talk about is light and background. And if you go to the download areas on the Web Seller Circle, you'll be able to download a color wheel, very similar to this. What I want you to do is download that and print it out and keep it near your photo studio or near your monitor somewhere so that you can refer to it and kind of get some inspiration while you're setting up your shots. And we're going to talk more about color and how it works and how we capture people's eyes with that. And then finally, the third ingredient is time. How much time you're going to spend setting up this shot versus the value of the item. Right here is a photo of some green garden shoes. You know, they're used and they're not really worth more than a few dollars. This photo is probably good enough. I mean, I imagine you're all thinking, yeah, you know, we don't want to spend a lot of time on something we're only going to get a few bucks for, so just slap them down and take a picture. I agree with that too. You don't want to spend hours and hours laboring over something you're not going to get a big return on. But for today, for the sake of argument, let's just say that these are the very fashionable Crocs in the latest fashion color, lime green. And you just scored a pallet load of them from Costco. Now it's time to start thinking more like an art director and less like a camera person or a gopher. We want to start setting up a shot that is more interesting and appealing to our potential buyers because we're going to use that over and over again. So here's what's referred to as a hero shot. It's got an all-white background and it is kind of the industry standard. And we all aspire to learn how to do these all-white shots because places like Amazon require you to use the all-white shots if you're doing listings. And we see on eBay that the professionals are using these all-white backgrounds. Designers love these all-white backgrounds because they can manipulate text and graphics around them. It makes it very easy to work for them. But is it the best shot for what we're trying to do in our eBay photography? Here is what's called a stylized shot, where I put these Crocs on a garden bench and put a galvanized watering bucket behind them in an old terracotta pot. Now, we've got some color in the shot and we've got some more interest. Now, pick one of these and, you know, kind of choose which one that you think would be the one you would go for if you knew how to do both of these shots. And I'll tell you, it's kind of interesting the results that I found because personally, I've learned how to do these all-white hero shots, and that's because I thought that was really what was necessary to be a professional selling on the internet. And I know how to do these now, and I love doing them. So I do these shots over and over again because I assume that they are the industry standard because they are the ones that are getting the attention. But what does that heat map show about these shots? Well, I took some screen caps and decided we'd do some testing. Now, before I go anywhere else, if you haven't heard my story, I put these up as test listings against each other because I wanted to take a screen cap and, you know, do it for the heat map to show how it's doing. And I put these listings up and they didn't show up. I put them in my store and I thought, well, okay, you know, oftentimes store listings just take, you know, 20 minutes to an hour or so before they actually start showing up in your store. They don't always show up right away. So I thought, okay, well, I'll go start wrapping some stuff up. I got other things to do and I'll wait for these shoes to show up and I'll come back and work on my presentation. about a half hour later, I get a phone call, and I can't remember her name, but let's say it's Vera. She says, hi, this is Vera from eBay. And I tell you, I'm really glad we were on the phone and we weren't doing a Skype thing, because I literally rolled my eyes. I thought, oh no, another one of these eBay calls from customer service reps who just read off a piece of paper about the newest changes. They just they don't even know what they're talking about. They're just reading to me. And I just assumed that's what it was. But Vera says, you just listed some stuff that isn't for sale? And I thought, oh, yeah. So I was like, yeah, sure I did. I put up some shoes for a test listing. And she said, that is against eBay policy. So if you ever do these test listings, which I recommend you do, there's a place called Everything Else, or a category called Everything Else Test Listings that you want to put these into. And don't put them up in the shoe category or wherever you think they ought to be, because you'll get in trouble. She was very nice and let me change them right away, so I didn't get a ding against my dashboard or anything like that. But I learned something new, a lot of things new doing this presentation. So we're getting off track, but here is my shoes, and I'm ready to do a heat map of these shoes in this listing and see how they compare to each other. And here is the results. The stylized, the blue background stylized shot got #1 in the eye tracking, and then we dropped down to this hero shot, the all white background, and of course the eye just skims right over this one that's good enough. But the thing I really thought was cool was that we brought our eyes right back to this buy it now, right up here with the green shoe listing, so the viewer gets the subliminal impression that they should click in and buy it now. And I think this is great. But I wondered, here we've got them just in a line. Is this really accurate? So I decided that what I should do is try this theory out against some other shoes and see if the results were the same. So I went back and I took a screen cap with some more shoes around it. And I thought, okay, now we'll see which one of these tracks the most and which one captures people's eyes. And, it actually kind of surprised me, because the one that captured the real heat map was the one I didn't expect. And that was this really ugly little thing right down here. It's bronze shoes. But what I've learned through doing this is that it was a reminder that people's eyes respond to contrast and density. On a page like this, they go for contrast and density. And even though this isn't a very good picture, this gets a lot of tracking. But then again, the eyes bounce right up to this second shot, this stylized shot. So I'm still able to be competitive and capturing some notice by using this colorful background or this stylized shot, as opposed to our all-white hero shot, which is the one, I think is the one I've always thought is the one that we want to go for. It does get a little bit of play, but not nearly as much as the stylized shot. I have this theory, too, that because we are Western readers, we're all used to reading right to left or horizontally. I was wondering how this would all play out if I had a horizontal view of these shots. So I went into my store where I could get a horizontal view, and then I did a heat map. And here's an interesting thing. Well, we did get a lot of heat for this one hero shot. Our eyes bounced over to the stylized shot, very quickly looked at this, this good enough shot, but then we bounced back over to this area on the stylized shot. And this is, as you know, is the area where people click in to look at that listing. And how wonderful is that we're getting people who are bouncing back their eyes right into that area where we want them to click. And that is a good thing in my opinion. Now I wasn't able to get my little green Crocs up into the snapshot view because I did put them into my listing, but I did do a general shot of this new snapshot view that eBay is offering because I wanted to see how it would play out here as well. And you can see somebody has some Crocs down there. And I am so trained as a photographer and an eBay seller or internet seller that even though I had seen those results before, I was still pretty sure that this shoe right here would get some heat or some heat map views, because not only is it a really good big photograph, but it's pretty much almost center in the view. So I was a little surprised when I came up with the results of the heat map, and here's what I saw. These shoes here, not all that great a picture, but that's where the heat map tracked us. And then we dropped down to these shoes. Still not a very good picture, but again, we've got contrast and color and density, and that is what people's eyes are tracking and noticing. So we, as you notice in here, all these hero shots of the green shoes with the white backgrounds are hardly getting any heat or any notice at all. So if you're thinking, how am I going to compete with big box sellers? Well, we all know that they tend to use these all-white hero shots, and we can start manipulating our photographs a little bit more towards, having some color in the background. Ask yourself what colors, background colors, would lend themselves to your products, is what I'm trying to get to. Now, I'm a photographer, so first thing I wanted to do is go out and buy a background. I found this Veritone background, which is a background that goes from dark gray to light gray in a gradient. It's about 6 feet long and about 4 feet wide, and I watched on eBay and I won the bid for about $10. It works really well for what I do. I don't do a lot of big items, so it's a nice size for just about everything that I photograph. If you've ever seen Lynn Drawley's auctions, the queen of auctions, she uses an old rustic kind of grayish bench or table for most of her products. Another good neutral background that doesn't clash with her products. So if you're going for one color, maybe to market your business and you want to have one color background, I would suggest you go with something that's sort of neutral, like a tan color or silver or gray or gold. Those colors don't really compete with items, and they're nice neutral, and it'll get you some color in the background. I wanted to show you really quickly before I talk about color theory a picture of an item that I just won at an auction a couple weeks ago. Nice neutral color background, nice gray background. We've got good contrast and density. No all white background. It should stand out really well. Now I want to talk a little bit about color theory. I want you to start thinking more like an artist or an art director when you're taking your photographs, and stop worrying quite so much about the technical side. You do have to learn your camera, but we need to start being a little bit more creative and using some colors. Now, traditionally, there are a number of color combinations that are considered especially pleasing. These are called color harmonies or color chords, and they consist of two or more colors in fixed relation to each other on the color wheel. The color wheel is divided into two sections, the warm colors and the cool colors. Warm colors are considered vivid and energetic, and cool colors are considered calm and soothing. So if you were selling relaxation tapes, for instance, you'd probably want to choose colors that were more on the cool side to calm and relax your potential buyers. So let's talk about some of these color theories in relation to your background and using them on eBay. The first one I want to talk about is called monochromatic. And monochromatic means one color, using one color throughout. Now this is a little bit of a difficult one to pull off with eBay. And what I want to say is that most people, when they think of monochrome, they think of black and white. Well, black and white is actually two colors, not one color. Here we've got a picture of a knife that I thought was really interesting in how the seller had chosen all different shades and tones of grays, and it really makes this knife stand out and look very elegant in against its background. Very professional looking shot using things around that this person found out in nature. I wanted to put another slide in here for monochrome because, like I say, I think it's kind of difficult to understand. Here's a monochrome of a doll. Now you can see we've got all different shades of this sort of rose pink color. Now this really pops out, and if you had this out on a gallery photo, you better believe people would notice it. It would just jump out at the page at them. Now of course when you get into your listing, you would want to put some regular color photos so that people see the correct colors of the doll, and especially if you're selling the clothes, you want to make sure you have accurate color representations of the clothes as well. But what I'm talking about here is grabbing that person's attention with that gallery photo by using something that's a little less traditional than we're seeing on the eBay site at this point. Now I always massacre this word, but analogous is a color theory where you take three different colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, like blue, green, and yellow. You use kind of one as the dominant color and the other two colors as an accent. And the accent colors support the main color. Doesn't matter really, but I want to show you this excellent example of that. Don't these zippers just really pop out at you? Wouldn't you notice these out on a gallery listing? I would, click in just to see them, and I am not a seamstress. I love this picture because it really is bold and it really grabs people's attention. There's another one called the complementary color scheme, where you use two colors opposite each other on the color wheel. For example, blue and orange. This high contrast of complementary colors will create a really vibrant look, especially when used at full saturation. But you have to be really careful with this and manage it because it can be very jarring as well. So you may want to tone it down a little bit. And I want to say that we're talking about photographs here. You would never want to use a complementary color scheme on a web design. Let's say red background versus with green text, because that will literally make it look like it's vibrating and your viewers can't read that. But as a color scheme for photography, this is a simple one to achieve, and it can have some really dramatic effects. Here's a sample I have for you of some lace against a blue background, and doesn't that just pop at you? Well, I think going down through the listings or the gallery listings, this would really stand out and grab a person's attention. There's a color scheme called triadic, and this is where you use colors that are evenly spaced throughout the wheel, and you want to use them in varying shades of saturation. You have your main color, and then you probably want the two supporting colors as a little bit more muted. That helps bring out the main color here. In this sample, I've used this purple vase, and I've used some rose petals, some dried rose petals that I had around the house in orange and green to support or make this purple really just jump out at you. It is an excellent way to really show color and bring it out. You also want to think about creating moods with colors. You can combine colors together to create a mood within your store or for the product that you're selling itself. Delicate items, you'd want to use a soft color palette like eggshell or pastel yellows or pinks and greens. Here I use some pastel greens to show this set of pearls and show you that it's a little bit delicate and give you the idea of its delicate nature. You might want to make a bold statement, and you would want to use warm colors like reds and oranges and yellows. Now, warm colors are known to physically raise a person's heart rate and create excitement. So if you're trying to create excitement with your listing, using those colors really is the ticket. Use them sparingly because you don't want people to be overexcited about your store, but it really can pop out and make an image very exciting. Now with vintage items, you might want to, in your listing, show people the era of the item you're selling. What colors were popular with the items or the era. For example, in 1970s, we had the avocado greens and browns and mustard yellows. I think this example is really neat. The seller used the mustard yellow background. Now we know without even reading any details what era this mug is from. It just really tells us a lot of information by using the colors in the photograph. Of course, if you were selling eco-friendly items, you'd want to use earth tones, blues and greens and grays. Those colors that are found in nature work really well at conveying eco-friendly items or green items. So don't forget to use those colors if you're selling anything that's eco-friendly. Moving along, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other ways you can attract and keep viewers in your listings by using photos. I want to talk about a study done by a company called iTrack. Now, iTrack did these studies for newspaper online news sites. Although I don't see, I think we can use this information as very relevant for using this information inside of our listing. They found that when there's eyes in photographs, people fixate longer on those photos and stay in the listing longer. So here, if we had a picture of a doll, perhaps our main picture, we should just move in close on a doll's eyes, or whatever it is. If it has eyes, maybe make your main photo, that first photo they see, a good sharp picture of eyes. Another observation from the iTrack study was that viewers spend more time on images that contain more than one face. The amount of time that eyes fixate on the photo jumps from a little less than 2/3 of a second for one person or one face up to 2.5 seconds for more than just one. That is an eternity in page views, to get something close to 3 seconds per page view. Now, I know you're all sitting back there thinking, but Cindy, I don't sell dolls, so how can I take advantage of this kind of information? This is, really a niche sort of thing. Well, here's my thought on it. If you're a mom and pop business or you have a small company, why not get a photograph of your whole company, whether it's your spouse, your significant other, all your dogs and cats, or your employees, and put them all in one photo. And instead of putting that information on the About Me page, where people may click into it to see it, how about putting a little blurb about your company down inside the listing somewhere with that photograph? if you're getting somebody to fixate on that picture for 3 seconds, you're getting them more and more primed to stay in your listing, interact with you, and eventually hit that buy now button. So that is one way you can take advantage of this information. Get some people in your listing and get people to stay in it a little longer. The iTrack people also found that when comparing home pages, and again, I believe this information is as relevant to the listings as it is to a home page, that smaller photos just don't attract viewers. In fact, they are often ignored completely. So you have to have a photograph of at least 365 pixels to get people to notice. Then you get more viewer notice. But the larger photo, the more you're going to get people to fixate on that listing, and for longer. So you need to have your photos up to 500 pixels at least. And then you're going to get a 53% increase over the smaller sizes. And they're going to stay there longer. Now, if you are using the eBay picture services, they will provide a photo for you. But if you're hosting your own, and what I have done traditionally for myself when I host my own is keep my photographs around 400 pixels. This information is telling me that I need to go up a little bit bigger to capture more images longer. Now, I know you all are very savvy sellers, and you're saying, but Cindy, I know this information. I know we need big pictures. Why are you bothering wasting my time telling me I need to have a good-sized picture or pictures in the listing? Well, I'm telling you this because this is one very specific way that you can compete with our big box sellers. These big box sellers are using CSV files or XML files to transfer their catalog of information onto the eBay site. And guess what? They're overlooking something very important that all of us know. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Here is our competition. And in fact, here is a $10,000 item. Yep, $10,766.99 is what they want for this helmet. And notice this picture. It is, I had to read this listing, but it's only for one helmet. I would look at this picture and think it was a bookend or a pair of helmets, right? We get down into their listing. The only photos down there are thumbnails of other stuff in their listings. They do not have a photo other than this gallery photo here. So if you're wondering how to compete, one very simple way to compete is to have a good photo that your customers can see. I decided that it would be really interesting to see what the iTrack people or study would show of this page. And I think you'll find the results interesting as well, and maybe a little reassuring. Not a whole lot of interest. There is some play on this this one helmet, and then it drops down to this DVD, and then the third part here is this banner ad to click into the store. So they are essentially driving traffic away from this $10,000 listing. And in fact, there isn't a whole lot of heat here. These points here, it really isn't indicating that there is a lot of interest or heat generated anywhere on this page. So people are not really that interested. So good large pictures, you're going to instantly step ahead of the big box seller. The other thing I found that was very interesting with this iTrack study is that people click on photographs. And this is something that I'm going to change, another thing that I'm going to change about my listings. Now, if you use a listing service like Octiva or Vendio or InkFrog, they will do this for you, where they put a thumbnail picture inside of your listing, and when somebody clicks on it, they go to a bigger photo. Well, I've always hosted my own photos, and I've always thought that if I had a good 400 pixel image or more, or several of them in my listing, that would be good enough for my viewers, that they could get all the information they needed from that without having to click off of the page to see a larger image. But they're finding that people just do this by habit. So if somebody wants to click on my listing and go see a bigger picture, I want to provide it for them. And that's one of the things that I'm going to change about my listings as I go forward, is because if they're clicking on my photograph and looking at the bigger picture, they are staying engaged with my listing a lot longer than if they click on that picture and nothing happens. People sort of expect that something happens if there's a picture there. So this is something to keep in mind. Now, I know a lot of you use those listing services, and it's not anything you have to worry about, but for those of us who use our own photo hosting, this is something that we need a consideration that we need to keep in mind. When we all started selling on eBay, we started going into everybody's houses, our friends, wherever we went, we started looking for stuff to sell. And it's referred to having eBay eyes. It's kind of embarrassing at times. Sometimes I have to make myself stop and hope that my guests or my hosts don't notice that I'm doing it, because I don't mean to, be assessing everything in their house. It's just a matter of habit. But what I want you to do now is to take those eBay eyes and start turning it into prop finding eyes for your products. Here are a couple of tips. Be playful. It opens yourself up to creativity. Have some fun, but also look at catalogs and magazines. It's fun to look at catalogs and magazines, but the other thing you can do when you're looking at catalogs and magazines is looking at what the professionals are doing and what they're using for props, because it can give you some ideas on how to set up your photos as well. Some of the things that you can do is add other items that are for sale. Now, you have to be a little bit creative with this, because you don't want to show everything in the listing, because people will get confused. But if you display it creatively enough, you can use these items as props and get people's interest, possibly in other products. Here we've got a camera, and maybe somebody doesn't want to buy this old Instamatic camera, but they are looking for a vintage scrapbook. They see this photo, they might think, there might be that scrapbook in the store if I go looking for it. I don't want this camera, but I like that scrapbook. Here's another example of a seller who has used this as well. She has taken an old Anchor Hawking cup, and that's what's for sale. But you notice in the background, she's got some old tins and another cup back there, and she's got it on a tablecloth. I don't get the idea that any of this other stuff is for sale, but I do get the idea that maybe if I go into her store, I will find these things for sale if I want them. I think this is an excellent use of creativity and props for, setting up this item. You also want to show hidden or obvious benefits in your photographs. Don't just write about them. I'm not a drinker, so I might not know how decadent or how fun it would be to have a dessert out of these martini glasses. But now I've got the idea. And I'm sorry I didn't get a better picture of this. It was like 80 degrees in my office the day I took this picture, and the ice cream was melting and I had to eat it. But your loss is my gain, literally. You also want to show props. I often get this question about, should I put some money in, or should I put a ruler in the listing so people can get the idea of the scale of the item? Well, technically, putting money in a listing and photographing it technically is illegal. You're not supposed to take pictures of money. But it's also not really, unless you're selling the money itself, a coin, a collectible coin, it really isn't all that interesting. But you can use day-to-day objects that people recognize as a prop to let people know the scale or the size of the item. So think a little bit more about what you're about to do, because you do want to show your item off a little bit artistically, show people that you've put a little bit of thought into your photograph and that you care about what you're selling. Now, I want to get back to this gallery image. I really want you to review your gallery images once in a while. And I'm guilty of this too. I list things and then I get like, oh, I know what that looks like. But especially as things are changing and the gallery views are changing, you need to stay on top of this and pay attention. These little tiny images, don't really show up. eBay is now giving us 1,000 pixels on the largest end. So if your image is 1,000 pixels from side to side, and you have a skinny listing like this, let's say it's only 300 pixels from top to bottom, well, do something to make that picture bigger. Resize it or put some text on it or something, because you're competing with a lot of other big pictures here. In fact, this seller, when we look at this listing, they have had to put some border and some highlight here to capture the attention. It's the same listing, pretty much essentially the same listing. So I thought it would be interesting to see a lineup of really different items like this on a heat map and what would show up. And here is a secret I found out. And if you can figure out how to do this, let me know, because I think this is like a really interesting secret that I'm sure that eBay doesn't really want us to know. But if at all possible, and I found this over and over again, not just on this one instant, but I found that if at all possible, if you can get to be this listing under the highlighted listing, you get the most heat map notice. And I thought that was a really interesting highlight. But again, we can see over and over again this people are responding to contrast and density. Yes, these are hero shots, or the all-white background shots, but they are very contrasty, very dark, and that is why these shots are capturing attention. But then we're getting this shot also, and again, the exposure isn't terrific, but it's got color in it, so it is capturing some of that heat or that attention. So color and contrast and density and color are really what are capturing people's notices. Now here's another example. I've been working with a fellow who's doing these lounge airbeds, and I found that the airbed category is really competitive. I had no idea before I started working with this fellow how many airbeds there are for sale and how competitive it is. And he had pictures that he had sent me to use for his listings, and I went out to look at them. They were smaller, resized images, and again, they were the hero shots, the all-white background, and here it is. It really doesn't stand out against this very much at all. It is really hard to capture somebody's attention with this little tiny gallery image. So I had to think about, how can I make my listing more competitive or stand out in these little gallery photos. So what I did was I went into Photoshop Elements, and I took a couple of the images that he had sent me, these two, and put them together, and I put some text in, and I also put a big thick border around it. I tried to match her shirt, so I had a nice big thick border around it. So I'm using more of that real estate space out there on that gallery listing. And then I took a heat map to see if I was even in the ballpark compared to those other listings. And this is what I found out, was that I'm kind of holding my own now. I'm doing much better than I was. I still have some work to do, and now that I'm back from Las Vegas, I'll be doing a little bit more tweaking to get some more contrast and density and more interest in this little gallery photo. But at least now I've got a little bit of a chance of somebody noticing that gallery image. And then the last thing I want to say is that it doesn't always have to be an image of the product, especially with media items, things like DVDs and books and CDs, that people understand what the item looks like. you might want to create a big old placard instead. You know, something like this, big free shipping. I know free shipping is kind of a dirty word, but something like this is much more likely to capture the attention and stand out, especially if you're in a DVD category where you're selling the same exact DVD as 100 other sellers. This is more likely to stand out against that kind of competition than your regular, photo of that DVD. So that's kind of about all I have to say. I want to thank you for listening, and I hope that I've given you some ideas about how you can better position yourself using your photos a little bit more creatively and using color and contrast and density to get a good photograph and get some notice, especially out there in the gallery image.